Greetings. I am Tom Earl. Welcome back to the celebration. We know you could be anywhere, so the fact that you're here today, sharing your greatest gifts, your time and energy, we are grateful. We are thankful. We want you to have this reminder that you are loved, you are appreciated, you are valued, just as you are.
Mm.
Last week we said, that's it. No more Remy. And then the bonus episodes, we were able to get together, and
Four
here
times apart.
Yes, we are. So why don't let's get some waving of the Remy. Do you want to wave to the camera? There we go. That's Remy. You can turn off your camera now if you'd like.
Okay.
Up to you. I myself just got a Mac Mini, and I did a webinar or something a couple weeks ago, and was like, "Oh no, I need to get some sort of camera." And then 10 minutes before this, I was like, "Oh no, I still don't have a camera." So clearly, I didn't pay attention to that sticky note.
Yeah, it was just there. It was just to write it on.
Exactly.
You can draw it in later, I guess.
There we go. For context, everybody, the episodes you just listened to with Remy and I, we recorded those months ago. And this one you're hearing, we have recorded within this. It's July 5th. So you're going to be hearing this a little more. I like to, if I can, because I batch record the episodes, and I like to bring the guests back so you can get a little more up to date.
Prepared.
What'd you say?
You're prepared.
We're prepared. So how have you been? Have you listened to any of the episodes?
I haven't yet.
I have not either. So we will not talk about the episodes.
No, I've been like mad. I don't know why I did this to myself. So I had like a 3-week poetry thing. We have this 3-week writing program, which really, I don't know, I guess it should be 3 weeks. But it's like morning is classes, and then the afternoon into the evening are like visiting faculty readings and like lectures / maybe a performance or something for the last 3 weeks. And then literally, what's up?
This is for the master's program that you're in?
Yeah, this is for the master's program. So, and I haven't even written anything from that, and we need to like have a tiny portfolio. Actually, not a tiny, like a pretty sizable portfolio that they want us to have, but there's like no time to even work because you're in lectures or readings. And then I went to this farm with Aang, my partner, because she worked on this farm, but they're closing the farm, so they had a reunion. And then, so we were like, whatever, reunion festivities the last, like, since Saturday. Yeah. So this is probably the most downtime the downtime has slowly begun, but I still have to write works. Like, I need to make pieces for my portfolio.
And you're spending your downtime with me as well. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, yes. I suppose so, yeah. And with New York for some reason. I don't know.
Somehow found yourself in New York. Where are your classes? Are your classes in New York?
They were in Denver, in Boulder.
Oh, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So are the lectures over for now? Like, is it a break?
It's done, yeah. All the classes are done. Just like papers and poems due next week.
Oh, they're due next week. How many do you need to have in?
18 pages of like essay, I guess. I don't know that, whatever that feels like. We'll see what happens. And then a lot of pages of poems. But that could be anything, that could be like 2-line poem on a page.
Okay.
So we'll see.
Up for interview.
Yeah.
What's this essay about? You have to write an 18-page essay? I haven't had to write an essay that long.
They want
I've written it for businesses for their copy.
Oh yeah.
Where they like right now I'm helping somebody write their copy for a 6-episode series they're doing. And I've
probably
what'd you say?
What's it called? A copy?
Like copy, like the words, they call it copywriting.
Oh,
And I've probably written for this person like almost 400 pages of copy.
400?
Hmm.
Oh,
And
sure.
it'll get distilled down like by the end to maybe 30 pages.
Wait, what?
I've done a ton of revisions where like I'll write it and maybe it's, like let's say 40 pages altogether. And
Mhm.
then the person will read it and be like, this is awesome. And it's helpful for them to like see it on paper to then be like, this is helpful and not what I'm looking for quite yet. So then we go back to the drawing board and rewrite it again.
And this is for
And
like products or something? Or like,
it's for their coaching business.
huh.
So it's basically for their trying to articulate their innovation. And I have to say it's been very challenging, but it's been a lot of fun. It's grown me in ways I didn't think were grown because it's like even if I don't feel like writing, doesn't matter. You need to crank out another 20 pages, right now. Right now. It's grown me as a writer to kind of and it has to be, this existential stuff, like this
Mhm.
person's genius. How do you articulate their genius? So it's kind of like any creative process where you're like, oh, I hate this. And then you're like, this is so amazing. I'm growing so much, but I hate this. When will this be over? I never want this to be
Yo.
over. It's so amazing. Wow, this is so invigorating. Oh, I'm so tired. It's like this, it's like both.
It is both.
The spectrum of creativity. We're just floating on it, you know.
Yeah, that's how I feel about. I mean, papers are cool, but like once it starts, it's fine. But then if I don't have like enough sources or like enough things that I'm like sourcing from that I'm actually interested in, it's like, yeah, I just don't know what I'm doing yet. It's writing into nothing.
Do you have the initial uh topic that you want to cover?
I do not.
Oh, we don't even have the initial topic.
Yeah, they just told us to write about the week. I'm like, okay,
Write about your week.
yeah,
Well, that could be anything. That leaves it pretty open.
it was pretty open, a little too open for me.
A little too open.
But
Well, should we try and narrow it down right now?
ooh, you want to try and narrow it down?
Would that be helpful? Would that be a good use of your time?
Let's see. Yeah, I don't know. Let me see what I even was working on. So yeah, I don't know. There was this one poet talking about language and translation and speech. And then this other person had like mentioned this writer, Catherine McKittrick, I think, who has this article called Mathematics of Black Life, which is like a
Mm.
short article. Um,
But what's that? What's that talk about? The mathematics of Black life. What does that talk about?
what does I don't know. I don't think it was like super mathy as I thought it would be. It was really, where's the PDF I had? Yeah, I can't even remember it. But look that up. The mathematics of Black life.
I feel like obvious places, not obvious, but I mean, the 4th of July was this week. So is there anything in there, any rabbit holes within the complexity of this supposed holiday that could get you to be able to write for a couple pages?
Um, oh, I mean, I was with my friends, and we were like, no. But then my brother posted on Facebook, and he was like, "Happy 15th day after Juneteenth," and I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was a good maybe. I was probably gonna write about, I don't know, just thoughts probably, and if they turn into anything by like the second page, I'll develop that thought.
So it's kind of like diving into the free write, like you discover it through the free writing process, what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think I need to write for a bit. Then I'm like, this sounds like an idea. This sounds like an actual concept that could work.
I mean, that's fair. That a big part of my creative process, and I think one of the things that I encourage is, just finding that, like, I think a lot of our ideas are going to come from the process rather than being able to like intellectually figure it out before it gets on the paper. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think that part takes like to be able to do that. I feel like you gotta be, yeah, I mean, you just gotta be practicing a lot, I guess. And
Yeah.
I haven't written papers in a
Mm.
while for me to be like, oh, I'm jumping in with this idea. I already know I want to write about that.
What is something that that you've uncovered in
Mm.
going through these, classes with poetry? Is there any way it's changed how you view art? Is this what you thought it'd be like? What are your thoughts now that you're kind of what, a year? Have you been in the program for a
Yeah.
year now?
Uh-huh.
What are your and
And
so
a
what are you
solid
halfway through? Do you have one more
I,
year to go?
I do have one more year to go. So I need
So what are your
to
thoughts?
look at PhDs. If, um, the first week was, I think the first week was kind of the chillest. I don't know. Maybe it's just because we were like warming up and stuff. Last week, there's this poet from San Francisco. I guess the Bay. I guess not like East Bay. Um, his name is Tongo Ison Martin, and he's the poet laureate for San Francisco. But he, I guess he does like spoken, like slam type poetry, I guess. Yeah, and he's just like an organizer. So like half of the class was him like being real. I feel like in a way that like other classes I'm taking during the semester definitely aren't like on the ground like that. And he had us like do this exercise where we slow down our poem really slowly to like let each word or like each little like two words maybe have their moment.
Like in the delivery?
Yeah.
What'd you think about that?
I really love that. It was awesome.
What did you love about it?
I think I just like I don't really like I don't really write to read. I'll usually just like if I'm like reading something, it's like improvised. I don't think I've really read anything that I've written for a while. But it was cool to like it was like much easier to memorize these words because they were like so we were like finding the like or at least like one of the optimal like states of the single word in the poem, which like lent itself to the rest of the poem, which really made the words in the poem like more memorizable and like how to understand how to like, oh, how would I say this if I'm saying this actually so that it lands.
So is it almost like thinking of each word intentionally rather than like words are kind of just means to the bigger words? Like making sure each word, if you're going to say it, that it has meaning rather than just it's supposed to get you somewhere.
Yeah. So he would like definitely, he wouldn't always, I don't know. I feel like he would always stop us. He's like, if you say a word and like you're lending that word too much to like, oh, this is a word that leads into another word or set of words, you'd be like, you need to like start over. Cause like
Mm.
the word needs to have its own power
Mm.
outside of trying to connect it to the rest of the poem.
That's pretty cool. It's like meditation.
It was, yeah, it was deep.
So you were
Oh.
saying though that in other instances the poetry doesn't have that connection to reality. Is that kind of what you're saying? That it's more
Like which instances?
like you were saying, that his class, his poetry is a little more real as compared to.
Oh, well, one half of the, I think like half the class was like, I can go back to his notes, but he was like going on about like dialectical materialism and like Marx came up a little bit. Also, just us being at like, I mean, it's like, what do you say? Something about like he's done work in like, what was it even called? But it's like with like youth who like might, yeah, I can't remember, but definitely in the school to prison pipeline, like trying
Mm.
to disrupt that. Um, and yeah, he basically said like it ain't. He was talking about like being in the trenches or like going back to help people in the trenches, and then like how the school is like, particularly that school is on like native land. Like the street that it's on is called Arapaho, which are one of the native people's land in that area, and then like how there's not even any like trenches in that area. I thought that was so funny. Yeah.
Um, I have not heard dialectical materialism since undergrad, years and years and years and years ago.
Years and years. You remember any of it?
I mean, I do. I mean, I don't remember the exact breakdown, but I know more or less dialectical materialism is like that are the way we come together to create industry capital, like that determines our values, how we interact with each other. And so if you want to
Mm.
solve things, it can't be idealism like intellectual. We have to go to what are the means of production, or what are the ways we're coming together as a society, more or less like our economic foundation. And so we can trace all of our problems back to capitalism. That was kind of like the gist, if I that I remember.
Yeah.
Do you want to clean it up a little bit? Was there anything I
Ooh. I do not have my notebook with me. That sounds
well
right. I don't know.
let me ask
Um,
let me ask you it this way. What's the kind of like way that you enter these kind of conversations? Like what do you, because the big one was, they were sharing it with us because like this is what we should focus on. This is how we're going to solve
like the
white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. Where it's about hooks. Like that's how. Like we're gonna solve it through love. Love is great, but we have to change systemically something. And the something in this instance is that, like Eric Williams' book, Capitalism and Slavery, like racism was invented to justify slavery. Like isms and institutional oppressions that the world is experiencing are like a byproduct of something rather than something that existed all the time, has always been here, and there's nothing
mm,
we can do about it, kind of a
mhm.
thing. That was like the gist that I walked away with.
Huh. I mean the little run through that he was giving us, and he was like, "This is a run through. This is like not even a 101." But he was just like,
This
um,
is an O1.
it was an O. So
We're not at 100, we're at 1.
no, we're at one. Yes, I need to. Oh, which is a good reminder for me to like look at it. I mean, I guess he was saying that there's always like a power struggle, in that if there's a power structure struggle, there's like a foundation, right? In this case, would be like capitalism. And then there's like, yeah, that foundation like is the reason for the power struggle or the confrontation of like some type of like more or less binary opposition, to be simplified down to it. Yeah, and I guess that would come, yeah, like you were saying, it's not, you can't just like, what do you say, like peace and love through it or something? Because there is like, in simple, like there is an oppressor. Like it's not like you can just shake through that, really.
how do you
Yeah.
how do you sit with all this? I'm sure you have, this is something you as well have thought about, read things about,
Hmm.
experienced firsthand.
It was just
You're an
like
artist. Where you at on all this?
more defining of like what was there. I don't know. I mean, I'm alright. I think it just defines it in a different way. But I mean, there's always like the quote, like, What is that quote? You can't like be
I knew it's where you're going. Audrey
oh,
Lorde quote:
which one?
"Can't destroy the house with the master's tools." Is that what it is? Is
Oh,
that
not
what
that
you're going
one.
for?
That is always relevant. But
It sounded like you were going there, like you can't. I'm like, oh, you gotta be. So I'm curious. This other can't. What's the other can't?
you can't abstain. I don't know, like you can't. Oh, what is it? Oh, the Desmond Tutu quote.
Oh, there we go. Let's do
Yeah.
it. You
If
can't
you are
what?
neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor.
Say it again, just in case.
Is the Desmond Tutu quote. If you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. I mean, I feel like that quote does a good job of like compressing it because you do have to pick a side at once.
What's let's just do a quote train. What's the MLK one? A threat to justice anywhere. Is
Oh
a
my
threat to
gosh.
justice everywhere. Your turn. Now you gotta do another one.
Oh my gosh. I don't know. Who was I talking to? I was just talking to somebody. Oh, I was talking to my friend. This is an indirect quote,
Let's do it. I like it.
but they were talking about how they were like calling their brother's child like they, them. And the brother was like, I don't know if I want to call that because I don't want to impress, like, I don't know, queerness on them or something. But then my friend's like, well, if you call them he, then you're already impressing he up on them. So you're actually not giving them options.
It's so true. Like even with my daughter being born, it's like, okay, it's like me and my wife talking. We recognize gender is a social construct. We recognize that. So now what do we do? It's like it's a social construct, and like in terms of using pronouns, like it's constant. Like people are constantly using pronouns for people constantly.
Hmm.
So either way, at this point, we are making a choice for her, and obviously just I used her. So at this point, we're using the choice of like biology and social construct align. But that's like our choice hasn't been articulated by the person to whom we're referring to.
Yeah.
So it's like no matter what, even if I went used a neutral or tried not to use any pronouns, it's
Hmm.
still a choice because she doesn't like she has the spiritual autonomy and she has the spiritual decision and there's the pathway within her. But
Hmm.
it's I think about this all the time. Like, what would it look like to live in a world where all of us collectively didn't have this like rigidity of this is the box we must all fit in all the ways, right? The TV shows, the school, the toys, the colors, the all the ways that like this violent process of get into a box and stay there, and the box means this, and it influences everything in your life. If we just didn't have that, if it was just like this free thing,
Uh-huh. Yeah,
say,
we don't have these like, yeah, these like just neutral spaces.
and just this like openness, like there, like if it wasn't a social construct, like if it was like, and I know there were societies and cultures that were like that, where you just do your thing. We're
Hmm.
not going to form identity around like if gender didn't exist, this idea of gender. I mean, there so many more of us would be well, everyone would be freer. But I don't think people
So.
fully understand how much their lives have been harmed and hindered because of this violent process of containing yourself in an artificial box.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of hard to see from the inside of it too.
Yeah.
We're like very much in the middle of it. And I think people are like very, I mean, there's like a fear of like I don't know. Yeah, people have like there's always like some fear that like everything isn't gonna collapse because of like trying to see what that looks like as a possibility, or like trying to reach towards that.
Well, to be fair, there will be a significant amount of, for lack of a better word, like ego death required because there are a
Mm.
significant number of people, especially men, for whom our identities are based upon this rigid structure of being a man.
Yeah.
Like I have seen in the personal development space, one of the most toxic spaces there is next to the nonprofit world.
Uh-huh.
And like one of the things that's kind of like this new thing, like you see everybody kind of copycat each other, and it's like, get really, really buff, really, really buff. Right. This is like them sharing from supposedly like a very realized place. And like you'll notice other guys treat you different and like all these things. It's very much this like, okay, so really what you're saying, like they'll give like this whole list is like really lean into this idea of masculinity. Lean into it. When you embrace it, when you conform to this image people have, the world treats you different. It's like of course they will. Because the more you conform, the more palatable you are
Yeah, to that structure.
to everything. And it's, the lighter your skin, the straighter you are, the more you act how people of feminine or masculine you're supposed to be, the this, the that, the more able bodied, the more all this stuff, the richer you are. Like, of course, you're going to get more opportunities and kudos because you have conformed and you've conformed in a way that not everyone has access to conforming. And that's one of the reasons it exists. But you got to like let that die. If it's like, actually, friend, none of that stuff you mentioned has anything to do with who you really are. Like, sure, be buff, but it's nothing to do with being a man. Do this, but it's nothing. These are made up identities. Like that identity that you made up would have to
It's
die.
a made up identity.
you
Yeah.
know, there's a construct, but that takes imagination and courage. So I do think that's like both. It's like this, like tangibly, there are tangible things that need to be done to,
Yeah.
and there are
Yeah.
also spiritual and imaginative things that need to be done.
Yeah. You know, and going back to Tango, I think that, yeah, I feel like that came up a bit with him because it's like, I think he kept saying, like, we can't be like, we're at this school that is a poetic school, but it's also a super white school. And there's people here who are like trying not to make like poetry just for poetry's sake. Like, I think he said something about like, you're writing something. Okay, make sure like a person you put in the poem might have some connection to like an actual person's life. Then you have a responsibility in this poem to like lend yourself to a truth rather than like abstracting super far away.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What's it been like for you going to a school like you're describing?
Um, wait. I think it's been cool. I mean, I'm liking seeing people grow. I'm liking like just learning different like poetry techniques right now. Um, I'm pretty like, yeah, I guess I've learned from I mean, I guess I've learned more from like undergrad and like just reading stuff and then like a lot of just writing and being around like poets outside of school rather than like looking at forms. So it's interesting seeing like people's forms or like being close to people who are trying different stuff. I mean, because a lot of like LA poets that I was around were like, I don't know, I don't, not like, yeah, it's not like super experimental poetry or like experimental poetry. Um, so the space is nice. Yeah. And just to have like a space of like, because if I like show my poetry to like someone who's like not writing like that, they're like, oh, like this is cool, but they're not like, they don't really know how to look at it. So,
Hmm. So like the skill of the listener, like
yeah.
it, and that's one of the things like when people are like, "Oh, I love music," I might be like, "Oh, do you play an instrument?" No, 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 no. I'm just a listener. It's like
The
That's
music.
yeah, for music. It's like for anything, it's like the consumer like is not in terms of capitalism, but like it's one of the greatest skills there is, like to learn to appreciate a style of music and be
Hmm.
like yesterday somebody was showing me that they 3D print Star Wars armor for specifically Mandalorian Star Wars armor. And then
Like human size?
yeah, like he wears it.
What 3D printer is large enough?
Sometimes he has to make it in parts and like
Uh-huh.
assemble it. But yeah, he had like the helmet, he had knee pads, and he had like a wrist guard that could like flick out a fake blade, and and it was really cool. But then the more he walked me through, like like okay, it looks like this because look, this scratch right here I did because maybe the Mandalorian was like walking through the jungle and got scratched, or like this is from a battle, and so then I could see like the world opened up to me. I was like, oh, so I can look at this armor and kind of in my mind I can create a narrative, like a backstory of how the armor came to look like this. And he's like, yes. So then the art was able to take on a deeper level where I was like, oh well, now that's fun. That I can, it's not just, oh, that looks cool. It's like, but what happened here? What and music's like that too, poetry's like that too. Adora has taught me how to watch film where there's films before I'd be like, oh my God, this is so boring. Please let this be over. And now I like, you know, you just develop a skill as a viewer that makes the art richer, And so I do think that like what you're saying, like some people you just wouldn't have the reference to, and you might enjoy the poetry, but you enjoy it even more the more like somebody who like I think that listening to hip hop, and it's such a huge genre, but
Uh-huh.
there's like an incredible amount of skill you need as a listener to like really get it. A lot of things, when people are like, oh my gosh, this and that, and then this and that. And it's like that for any genre. So I hear you when you're like, you might read my poem and just not get it. It's like, yeah, because you some
Yeah.
some poetry, you need that skill as a listener. You know what I mean?
Hmm. I mean, yeah, he even made me kind of, yeah, maybe listen to slam poetry a little more. I guess the thing I don't like about slam is that it's always like, I don't know, like my world of poetry and then slam poetry, they seem like they're like always so isolated. And it's like, like watching, yeah, like, yeah, there's two different genres within a thing. And like, I'm the type of person, like, if I'm doing like yeah, like, okay, so if I like go out, I'm fine. I'm kind of fine hearing like only like Afro beats or like only dance hall. But I do like just something outside of that, like slipped into the mix every now and then. So if I'm like going to slam, I just get like, okay, I gotta listen to slam for like 2 hours. Like there's a lot of slam. I wish there was someone who would just come in the middle and like do a performance or like something a bit weird. And then yeah, the same way with more experimental things. I think like Tango did that because he like in this school that is more like someone's like showing a poem that is also a song or like a poem that is part of a video or like a poem inside of a movie or something. And then he's just like doing this spoken word on stage that is like very strong. Yeah. I don't know. How do you feel about that? Whatever part.
I mean, that's interesting because it's like what is it in quantum physics? The
Mm.
observer changes the experiment,
Uh-huh.
where like I don't know it exactly, but more or less like an atom changes when somebody's looking at it. So it's the same thing with art. Like the way the audience, the delivery, the space, the context
You know?
changes. Like even content. Like I have, but I don't really perform my spoken word, but like I have this poem that more or less talks about how people are always like, oh, Abraham Lincoln set the slaves free. Like, God, I love that guy. What a guy. What a role model,
Yeah, what a
you know?
guy.
And it's like, well,
What a guy.
it's not that simple. For one, like we have quotes where he's like, if I could have saved the Union and still kept slavery around, I would have. But like didn't have that option. I had to. Like, so he didn't do it because he was this like race conscious person. Right. That's kind of like point number one in my poem. And then like point number two is like, if we want to talk about like people actually like quote unquote freeing people, like, okay, Abraham Lincoln should be like 100th, a millionth down the list. We need to talk about like all these other people that actually set people free. Like we obviously know Harriet Tubman, but there's like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, like everybody. Like that is to me the narrative. So that was like a poem that I found people who knew me, right? I perform in like community they'd love, but I found like if I would go like deep south and perform that, people got uncomfortable, made people really uncomfortable.
To like white folk?
No, usually, we were performing to Black folks.
Whoa, and they were like
one time we went to this like really deep south, like Florida deep south venue, and I did a poem, and like people were standing up, like throwing things, so excited. And I was like, fuck, I'm gonna bust out this poem. Everybody loves this poem. And I'm telling you, crickets. I was like, oh shit. And so, this is where I had to become like more and more like people give me feedback. Like,
yo,
like the fact that you're white, like it changes it. It's like it's the content of the poetry. And also it's the context of where we are. And then it's the context of who you are. Like all of those things are going to go into how a poem's experienced. And so like you're saying, like with is it in a poem? Like you think of some of the poetry in like Lemonade, like if you were to just be in an open mic and hear some of the poetry that was written for the visual album, you might be like, okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But like in the context of a entire Beyonce production, you're like, at least me, it's like, oh my God, these words. Yes. It's like, but what's tough about slam is primarily you're doing slam to become the national poet laureate who gets to travel around the country and poetry for a living. Like that's most people who do slam are like, this is kind of a pop culture way of doing poetry. And I get to say what I'm passionate about. And it gets to make a difference. And I could make a living off this. Like people could get me to come to their colleges. So it's like, there are certain poems, there are certain topics that are important and at the same time get audience approval. So how do you not let your message become like a gimmick? You know what I mean? It's like really tough. There are a lot of tough. And at the same time, how do you not have a poetry voice? Like now I'm doing a slam poem and slam poems must sound like this. Like, how do you not do that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's tough. There's like a lot of built-in, like your gift can become your curse. Like all the gifts of slam can become the curse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And the more successful you get, the wider slam gets. Like regionally, it's very to me like a Black performance art. But then when you get to like the national level, it's like, where have all the Black people gone? It's all white people here.
Really?
Why is slam? Why is this room so white? It's like, oh, with anything, the more successful the genre becomes, the more palpable it needs to be. So, why don't we just have white people say it? Like, and who has the money to organize things or to take that leap of faith of quitting your job to become give it a shot? We have finished the interview and have realized we talked for over an hour, so we are splitting it into two, and it has been decided either by Remy and I, by me, or by Chi-Chi. This is where we're splitting it, so my friends might feel like an abrupt split, it's because it is. So you're gonna get to hear the rest of this next week. And next week, this like where we finish, where we got to, I like got to go to places. I was like, oh, this is why spiritually Remy and I were supposed to talk today.
Yeah, dang, we should have landed on the spiritual.
But we had to get there. It's like part of the process. You know what I mean? You have to like I'm all about the indirect route these days. Like you got to meander. You got to meander there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I guess this episode was the meandering. Next episode, we'll see where we were going. All right. We'll see y'all there. As always. Oh, why don't you plug, since it's a separate episode, why don't you plug your IG?
Find me on Instagram, Yummy Online. So that's YUMMY __ online. That's 2 underscores.
Boom. Don't forget the 2. And they'll be in the show notes.
Mm.
You can find anything I'm working on, tomearl.me/DCM invite, direct connect method is what that stands for. And it's where we wrestle with a lot of these creative concepts and getting out of the rational, intellectual way of creating that we've been taught, and learning how to do it from more of a free, open, meditative place.
Mm.
All right, y'all. As always, we're wishing you peace and blessings. Thank you. One more thing. I'd love to continue the conversation. Feel free to join me at tomearl.com/join. Subscribe below, or let's connect on social media. Tom Earl Artist. Thanks again for watching.